For federal employees, that thrift savings plan is their chief vehicle for a secure retirement. Long-term financial planning, though, is more of a three-legged stool, according to my next guest. Certified financial Art Stein of Arthur Stein Financial joins me now. And yes, can you overdo the TSP savings to the detriment of other things you should be doing towards retirement, Art?
Yes, Tom, and that's the key point. Is you're not going to, I would never say to someone, gee, you're putting too much money in the TSP if they're taking care of their other financial needs. And their other financial needs are frequently, though, for a lot of people, either ignored or not given sufficient priority. And that's things like life insurance and long property and cash, auto and homeowners insurance, health insurance, maybe. And just as a for instance, one time I met a federal employee who was he was in his 30s. He had 3 kids at home. His wife had left the workforce to take care of the kids, and he had life insurance equal to 1 year's salary. And I just said to him, you need more life insurance. And he said, well, we can't really afford it. And I had to say, you always want to put at least 5% contribution into the TSP because you get that great match by the government. But I said, if you need to reduce your TSP contribution down to, say, 5% in order to buy the life insurance that you need to protect your family, you should do it. And, absolutely makes sense. People tend to hate insurance companies. I understand that. They're not our friend. It's a business. But life insurance is important. Fortunately, not many people die while they're still working, although it's not an unusual event. But for the people that do, if they don't have a sufficient amount of life insurance, it can be disastrous if they have a family. And even just in the example I gave, if the employed spouse had died, it could be a year before his wife, in this case, was able to go back to work, either emotionally, the kids would be devastated, and then she's not going to make as much as she should because she's been out of the workforce and might be hard to find a job. I mean, it just would be a financial mess. Same thing with disability insurance. Of course, the feds have a great free disability insurance coverage, but it's not great disability insurance coverage. It's free, so that's nice, but it pays 60% of their high 3 the first year they were disabled and couldn't work. But after that, it would only pay 40% of their high 3, and the maximum inflation adjustment is 2%. So lots of insurance companies offer disability coverage that supplements the federal coverage and gets their coverage up to about 80%. That might be worthwhile. And then another situation that I see so many people do not a risk that is not adequately covered is with auto and homeowners insurance, and it's their liability coverage. So we're not talking about the, say, auto insurance that you have to repair your car if you're in an accident. What's really more important is the liability coverage. Like, suppose it's a nice day, you're got the windows down, a bee flies in, you get flustered, maybe it stings you, you go through a light, you hit somebody, turns out she's a plastic surgeon, it's clearly your fault, she's making $500,000 a year, and maybe the accident is severe enough she can never work. Well, she's going to sue you and could easily win millions of dollars in lost income. And your insurance company is going to say, hey, we're definitely going to cover you. You've got like $250,000 in liability coverage. We pay that, you pay the rest. Well, in my example, hypothetical, $1.7 million in additional settlement, people would be wiped out. And the good news about this is a risk that's very cheap to cover. You can get what's called umbrella liability insurance. It's going to raise your total liability coverage for auto accidents and accidents in your house to $1 million or more. And it is so cheap. You can get $1 million in coverage for about $600 a year. You can get $5 million in coverage for
Sure.
8 or 9 million. You're not likely to need it, but if you do, it would be a lifesaver.
Yeah, that's getting into the weekly Starbucks expenditure that you could forego to do that.
Absolutely.
You may not even have to reduce your TSP payment if you could just reduce your Starbucks payment.
And people may think, well, they don't see that as a big risk. But think about people who have young kids and they're having friends over and they're running around and maybe their little 6-year-old friend falls down the stairs, and maybe the little 6-year-old friend is pushed down the stairs because there's roughhousing going on. If that person could be like maybe never walk again from a back injury, and again, millions of dollars in a settlement.
And
So I would definitely recommend that everybody ask their insurance agent about umbrella coverage and just spend that small amount of money for a large amount of coverage.
we were speaking with Art Stein, certified financial planner with Arthur Stein Financial. So that's outside of your TSP insurance, and that takes many forms that you have to cover. What about the idea of also saving outside of your retirement and the tax benefits or whatever of that, Roth or regular TSP, and just having rainy day savings for other purposes such that you don't have to raid that TSP if you need a loan to yourself?
Absolutely. Tom, for our clients, we always recommend that they have an emergency fund, minimum 3 months of expenses. Many of our clients have 6 to 12 months of expenses, which, once you get up to 12 months of expenses, especially for federal employees and retirees, that is a sufficient emergency fund. And remember, an emergency is not necessarily a bad thing. Could be a child getting married and you want to pay for a nice wedding or a big family trip. One of the things that you can then use the emergency fund for is not having to sell investments to pay for that big expenditure that you want to pay for. And maybe it's like 2022 when the stock and bond markets were both down, and therefore all the TSP funds except the G fund were down. And that would have been a bad time to sell investments to pay for something. If you have a good emergency fund, you can use that.
All right. Any other elements to think about? Insurance, that rainy day fund. I mean, automobile expenses can be crazy if you let them.
Absolutely. And, everything's more expensive now. I mean, automobile insurance has gone up a lot because the cost of repairing autos has gone up a lot. My wife had to replace a bumper on her car, and I didn't think it would be that big a deal, but it turns out the bumper's got a lot of electronics in it now in these days. And even just replacing a side mirror is expensive, again, because of the electronics. And of course, we're now seeing that homeowners insurance, and this varies across the country, but homeowner insurance costs have gone way up in general, and especially in areas along the East Coast and the Southeast, where they're subject to, what I call global warming. A lot of people don't like to use that term, but I think it's clearly happening. And it's driving up the cost of homeowners insurance. And some people, then decide to go cheap on their homeowners insurance and, not get flood insurance, even though they're in Florida, not get wind insurance when they're in Florida because it's become very expensive. Well, the reason it's very expensive is because the risk is very high. And insurance companies are actually quite competitive with each other. And if the insurance costs are going up, it's not just because it's not because they're gouging their customers. It's, much more likely to be because the number of claims has gone way up, and the cost of those claims has gone way up. People tend to judge insurance based upon premium, and that's a mistake. It's a cost-benefit analysis. Someone offering you the lowest premium often is able to do that in insurance because they've lowered the benefits. And you may not even see that, or it might not be easy to determine. Don't fall for that. You need to fully insure your house. You want to have a lot more liability insurance than most people do, millions of dollars. And depending upon your situation, life insurance can be really important. A single person probably doesn't need life insurance. Someone who has dependents, children, they need a lot of life insurance.
And with respect to that house insurance, then the word you want to look for, I guess, is replacement cost.
Guaranteed replacement costs. There are various types of, you get into a whole series of definitions, and you want your homeowner's insurance to guarantee you that they will pay you the cost of rebuilding your house no matter what it costs. And that they're not going to be able to come back to you and say, well, we've amortized the age of the house and reduced the value, or we only guaranteed we would pay you X amount. And now, because a lot of people in your neighborhood need coverage, that's gone way up. You want full replacement cost.
Plus, what's inside the house, too.
For a lot of people, you don't need a lot of coverage there. I mean, I'm not saying you don't need several $100,000, but that's not the expensive part of the insurance. And actually, when I just renewed my insurance, I switched carriers. My one complaint with the new company is they had a minimum